Do you know, as I've got older, I've got more into jazz. I mean, I suppose my first introduction was really Steely Dan
Yeah.
and the way Donald Fagen moved into a more jazzy feel. And there was a British band called If, which I really liked, and they were very jazz orientated. And then I got into people like Chick Corea and people like that. And I just, as I get older, I really just like the jazz vibe. I don't know why. Maybe it's just as you get older, maybe, and you just become more sophisticated in your tastes. I don't know, possibly.
I've gone off lyrics a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I like classical music and weird old new age music now.
Yeah.
What do you find as weird old?
Yeah, right.
What's weird new age?
Like analog synthesizers, people like Yas
Oh.
and Stephen Halpern. I like that kind of stuff.
Oh, right.
Yes,
Interesting.
that was all getting started when I was young. When I was in music school, electronic music was just getting started. They had ring modulators and all kinds of stuff, but it wasn't like today. I mean, they just didn't have the equipment. And Penderecki and all those guys were still writing regular music. Penderecki's music is in Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
I mean, it made him rich.
Yeah, I love that analog
film.
synthesizer sound. Like when you had to use actual technology to make those kinds of sounds, whereas now everyone does it on laptops and computers. It's too easy.
Yeah, in fact, the music that is in that little film thing that Tony posted, that's all electronic music by this friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Logan. But that's an old film. That's not the film that won all the awards.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's okay. It's okay.
We can discuss that. Right, I'm about to start to go live now. I'm set up, ready to go. So
Okay.
I'll probably do that now. Now, I wanted this just to be completely informal, Myron. The only areas I'm going to really focus in and that I'd like to touch on precisely is your encounter with the eagle, where you saw your own future self in its eye. I really like that one. Also, the encounter with the fawns, leprechauns, and unicorns in the El Secundo Park. That's always been a favourite of mine. And your incident with the Minotaur in the Place of the Four Stars. But that's not important, wherever the conversation goes. But they're the areas I'd like to zoom in on at some stage or other. But other than that, we're just going to go free fall. Sarah can come in at any time, and I'm keen for Sarah to come in with comments and ideas and thoughts as well. So it's a three-way thing. And let's just go for it right now. I'm going to now start on, now let's, where do I need, where am I now? Oh, where am I? Close that. I've just lost Facebook. Right, I'm ready to go. Oh, right. Yeah, this always happens. I've got to do it again. It loses itself and I've got to do it again. Okay. So let's, it doesn't like waiting. Just bear with me, guys.
All right, this Zoom thing is so funny. Everybody's using it now.
Okay, let's go again. Obviously, it doesn't like it if you leave it too long. You ask to go live, and if you leave it hanging, it doesn't like it. But we're okay. We've got a minute to go yet, so it should be okay.
I just got someone asking me where this is going live.
Okay.
You sort out the Facebook thing then? Did you find the way to get it on there?
Yes, it should be. Yeah, that should work now. We should be The problem was that it defaulted to only me. That was the reason.
Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, maybe.
And is this on speaker view?
How do you mean speaker view?
So it looks like it. So whoever's talking is the big screen, and then everyone else is the small screens.
I don't know. I haven't done.
No.
I haven't set it up like that. I don't think.
No.
But
We're all the same size, whether we're speaking or not.
Okay. I was.
okay. How could I put it on speaker view? Is there a way of doing that?
Can you see the top where it says gallery view?
View, gallery view. Yeah, but onto speaker view. Okay.
Is that working? So
yeah, I'm now seeing you. That's good. Okay. Right. Now I want to make sure that I can go live now. Right. I'm going live now. And if you can tell me as soon as we appear so that we don't chatter insanely.
Meeting is now streaming live on Facebook, it says in the corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're on.
Good.
We're on.
We're on. We're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Anti-Peak Consciousness Hour INCON. Today, I'm really excited. This I talked to many people, and I've interviewed many people over the years. But today's guest is somebody. This will be, I think, the third or possibly fourth interview or discussion I've had with him. And Myron Dyal is an extraordinary man, and I mean extraordinary in so many ways, but in a very, very positive way. He has lived an extraordinary life. And what was very strange is when Myron first contacted me, which was very soon after I wrote my first book, Is There Life After Death? The Extraordinary Science of What Happens When We Die, when I received an extraordinary email. And the email basically was saying, and Myron can correct me if my memory is wrong on this, but somewhere on the lines of, you're going to find this the most intriguing email you're ever going to receive, because this is a message from an entity that you discuss in detail, the daemon. And the daemon introduced itself to me, or herself, or himself, and we've discussed this many times, as Charon. And Charon was the daemon of Californian artist Myron Dyal. And we then opened up communication. And since then, we have built up this incredible long distance friendship. And I think I've referenced Myron in more of my books than anybody else. I've referenced him in at least 3 books. And it's because his experience is simply so extraordinary. Now, we've done formal interviews before, but this time it's an opportunity to just have a really informal chat about Myron, his life, his works, his art, and his experiences. So without further ado, what I would like to do is to just open it up and let Myron just very quickly introduce himself and give a little bit of background to who he is and what he does. So Myron, welcome to INCON.
Well, welcome is indeed all the way to London. It's really amazing. Really amazing. But yeah, I mean, I remember when I read your first book, I went, okay, here's a guy who gets it. There's finally somebody walking the right road, and it isn't all just, nonsense. I mean, I read all of the books of the 60s, all of the Castaneda books and out of body, the out of body book, the most famous one from must have been 1960 something.
What, the Robert Monroe ones?
Yeah. And because I was, I started out, well, I sort of started out as a child, but
it's the best way to start.
Yes, I started out as in the church, and actually it's a Protestant church, a Baptist church here in Inglewood, where I live in California, in Southern California. And I was born and raised in a town called Inglewood, which was all white. I mean, white. We had one Japanese couple that ran the local market until Safeway, this big chain, bought them out, and one Hispanic person. Probably why we never won any football games, because we didn't have any black players. But so I lived in a kind of safe box of a community, Inglewood. And the new Rams Stadium is being built here, and it's being built in Inglewood, the Los Angeles Rams. Well, anyway, everything was going fine until I was about 4 years old. And then I went into a coma, and I was in the coma for, well, nobody's giving me a direct answer, but I think it was about 4 months. And the doctors basically told my parents, you know, if he comes out of it, he comes out of it. If he doesn't come out of it, he doesn't come out of it. And people have been in comas for 20 years. And one day I came out of it.
Well, Myron, what were the circumstances of you going into the coma? Were you at school? I mean, did you just fall to the ground? What did your parents say happened? Did you just disappear, or what?
The only witness was my brother, who's 4 years older than I am. So I was 4, he was 8. And he claims that I just...
Very much, just a very quick question, Myron. Could you turn your mic up a little bit? Apparently the sound is a little bit low.
I think it's as tough as it's going to be. Can you hear me now, or should I just talk louder?
Sarah, can you hear him okay?
Sarah?
We can hear you, but the sound is a little bit echoey.
Oh, okay. Well, if we can live with it, we can live with it for now. If it's not coming across too badly,
maybe just a little bit louder and a bit closer to the computer might be good enough.
Okay. So anyway, my brother was the witness who saw me fall, according to him. And he ran across the street. There was a nurse that was across the street, Mrs. Amiot. And she came over and did whatever she did. She got me to this hospital, and Children's Hospital in Inglewood, and I was there for like those 4 months. And then I just came out of it. And when I came out of it, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know them. They were strangers to me. I didn't know my parents, my brother. I didn't know anybody. In fact, nothing penetrated the coma except music. That's the only part of the brain that was not affected by the actual event. And because music is in a different part of the brain structure, it's not, it's not. That later on, they would find that it was in my hippocampus, in the visual cortex, where the main, that's where the damage is. I have a picture of it. Well, anyway, so I didn't know these people. I mean, they were strangers to me, and but in the room, in the hospital room, there was something standing in the corner of the room that I could see that nobody else seemed to be able to see. And of course, that would later on become Charon. But in the early days, it was just my friend, my childhood friend kind of thing. So, so I went home, and that's when it all started.
So did Charon, so you saw Charon when you came to, and then Charon came with you. And how was Charon manifest at that time? Was it just a shadow figure that you saw in your periphery vision, or was it more, did she speak to you, or what?
Actually, she was in a very human form. I think probably not to frighten the child. That's my guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know what Karen does, or why he, or it does what it does. It just does what it does. But she told me immediately, and I was kind of surprised that she would tell me this at the age I was, but she said that the Myron that was born was removed. That consciousness was removed and replaced with this consciousness. And now I'm sure back then I didn't even know what the hell she was talking about. But when I'm looking back on it from now, it made perfect sense. And of course, very quickly, within 3 or 4 years, I would be getting, the fact, because everybody was telling me that the person before the coma was very different than the one after the coma. I wasn't the same personality at all. And never mind that I didn't know them, I didn't really know me. I mean, I was like an empty slate that somebody had to write on. I had to learn to read and write. I had to learn to, I didn't read too well anyway in the early days, but my whole experience of the world completely changed very quickly. I never listened to any children's music. I started, like I told you, I started listening to jazz from the 50s. I mean, I was more involved with Miles Davis and Coltrane and classical music, especially classical music, than I was with any childhood music. I wasn't even interested in childhood music. It seemed to feed the consciousness that had been placed and had replaced the old consciousness. Years later, I would ask Heron why this happened to me, and the only answer I got, I don't always get all the answers. The only answer I got from her was, this is your destiny, and you have to deal with it. Because it was a pretty miserable childhood. I had seizures during all my childhood, grand mals, the kind you pass out, grand mal and tonic-clonic, meaning tonic, this, that, and clonic meaning release. Because when you have a seizure, your whole electrical system completely resets. So you're going along and then there's a break and then it resets, and that reset is the seizure. When it breaks, that's the seizure, and then you have to recover. And it takes, it can take 2 or 3 days. What's postictal, what they call postictal, and then I can have like 2 or 3, in a week. But they gradually get easier and shorter and all that kind of stuff.
As I recall, your parents being religious and being Baptists obviously had difficulty with the idea of a child going into these states, which necessarily within their worldview would almost be like demonic possession, wouldn't it? There'd be something so bizarre to them. And I guess this is why they reacted the way they did towards you, because it must have been difficult for them, but it must have been profoundly difficult for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, they thought I was demon possessed, and I went through 2 exorcisms. And it's kind of funny. I was about 5 or 6 years old when I went through the exorcisms. And I thought it was kind of silly. I couldn't take it serious. This consciousness that I had wasn't going to take that serious, just wasn't going to do it. And but I went through them, and then of course I pretended like that I was cured of this demon that not Damon but demon that had taken me over. And I just went on with the church just like anybody else would. I I grew up in the church. All my friends were in the church. All my girlfriends were in the church. I was in the church choir. I taught Sunday school. I was going to be a music minister. That was really what I was going to do. And I went to seminary later, but I dropped out pretty quick. And because I couldn't be me and be a Christian at the same time, because I didn't believe that it was real. I thought Christianity, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here. This is just me. it doesn't got anything to do with your truth. Your truth is yours. My experience is my truth, and it's the only thing I have. So I can only give you back what I have and what I've felt. So I went on a journey to try to find myself. There's an old expression, you know, I've gone looking for myself, and I have gathered myself from everywhere. And that's kind of what I did. I read every book I could get my hands on. Even when I was like 7 and 8, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. I was reading the I Ching. I was reading.
How did you, as a question then, how did you find those books? Did you just sense that these were the books you needed to read? Were you being guided to read those books? Because I would imagine at that age, a young child wouldn't necessarily know about the Bhagavad Gita or the I Ching. So clearly there was something guiding you even then subtly to say, this is the area you need to read about. Because that's extraordinary at that age.
Yeah. Cameron, I was... When we used to have bookstores, and they were everywhere, now they're gone, but now there's Amazon. But I used to go into the bookstores, and I would always go to the philosophical religious sections and look through the books and see if there was anything in them that spoke to me. And Karen would say, you see that book there? Take that down and go buy it. And so, what she did that with the I Ching, and with Lao Tzu, who I loved. I just loved Lao Tzu. I just thought, this is so mature. This is so, you know, Buddhism is a whole different kind of way of thinking. There's no theology really. Yeah, there's a lot of gods and goddesses in Buddhism and stuff, but most of that is added. That's added in, you know, and since everything is basically an illusion anyway, so until you get to nirvana or whatever, there's no truth really. There's just this journey towards truth. Well, I started reading that at a very young age, and the I Ching was wonderful, just wonderful, because the introduction was written by Carl Jung, and I thought Carl Jung was Chinese. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, who the hell is who's Carl Jung? I mean, I didn't know he was a German or Swiss or whatever the hell he was. So, but I did what he said he did in his introduction. What he asked the I Ching, how do I use you? That was the question. That was his first question. So I thought, okay, you know, this guy wrote the introduction, and this is the Wilhelm, the very famous translation. You know, he went to China and he did this illegally. He stole the literature and then he translated it himself. Oh. And then they put that book together. So they collaborated on that book. Well, anyway, so I started throwing hexagrams 10 years old, 11 years old.
Were you using the arrow stroke technique? You know, where you have the arrow stalks.
I was using three coins that I had found in the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah, one day I was at the ocean, and a friend of mine was had a what do you call it? You know, a thing that picks up metal.
Yeah, a metal detector.
Yeah, metal detector. And he said, look, if you want to see where the coins are, just look at the tide as it goes out and you'll see things flipping. Those are coins. So I found 3 nickels that had been in the ocean for a very long time because they were worn down. And those were the 3 coins that I used. The rest of them, I still use them.
Wow.
And so I don't think those things are coincidences. I think that was intentional. The stocks is a much more complicated process, filling the stocks, and I wasn't mature enough to do it anyway. And so I started asking the I Ching questions. Like one of the first questions I asked was, should I be a Christian? You know, should I actually, go that direction? Because there's no reason why you can't be spiritual and be a Christian. It just, as long as you're not trying to burn me at the stake, I don't care what you do. But when you ask the I Ching questions like that, you get very interesting answers. And the answer I got was difficulty at the beginning. It's one of the hexagrams that's in the book. So and then there were some changing lines in the difficulty at the beginning, and the changing lines were pretty emphatic to drop it, get out of it. And I didn't do that right away because my whole social life was involved in Christianity, in the church. And I only had 4 friends in high school and junior high that we grew up. In my town, you started at grammar school, you went to junior high, and you went to high school, and it was the same people. Those people, so they saw me have seizures. They saw me have seizures on the playground. They saw me have seizures fall off this railing. But nobody took it very serious.
Yeah, because nobody actually diagnosed it, did they? That's the curious thing, that you were having seizures, but nobody said Myron is experiencing epilepsy. Became part of you, didn't it? Part of your identity.
Yeah, I mean, they thought it was something else. Some people thought I was faking. Some people thought I was, because I was a pretty strange kid. Looking back, I remember how my daughter grew up, and she's a rock. She knows who she is. Her directions are done. Bam, she's on her road. I was all over the place. I was already seeing visions. I was already having experiences. You had mentioned earlier, I remember when my father used to beat me for my crimes against Christianity, and they were pretty bad, these things. And Charon would just take me away. So my dad would start to beat my legs, and Charon would take me to on the back of this giant black crow. I mean, the crow must have been the size of the football field or something. It was huge, and we would go to another dimension, and we would fly over this. In fact, in the new film, the new Charon film, there's a whole visual experience of this. Mm-hmm. And so while he was beating on me, we would fly over this beautiful valley that was just loaded with gorgeous flowers, and I mean the colors were just Van Gogh-like. They were just amazing colors, and then I would sort of come back, and I sort of could hear my dad say, "Have you learned your lesson?" or some bullshit like that, and I went, I guess, whatever lesson I'm supposed to learn from being beaten. I didn't say that. That was in my head. I mean, I wasn't that stupid. But so Charon would bring me back, and so I was going out of body back then, but I didn't know the definition of it. I mean, I didn't know that was going out of body, because I was certainly going out of body. And I used to do that in church too. I'd be sitting there listening to some guy pontificating about nothing, and some of it was political. And I wasn't in church for politics. You know, for me, it was supposed to be a spiritual thing, not about any particular political situation. But I would be sitting there and I would just go away, and or like one time I was sitting there in church, and I was watching the minister up on the podium, and he was talking away. All of a sudden, he changed into this priest that was dressed in black and had these strange emblems on him. And right next to the priest, they were slaughtering pigs.
Wow.
And the blood was running down this trough into a big barrel, and then everybody was taking a drink of it. And so I took a drink of it, of this blood. And then I found out years and years and years and years later, when I was studying anthropology, that took place, that particular ritual is not uncommon for certain cultures. And so I sort of come out of it. And then I guess you could say I was a very quiet and respectful person, because I never made any noise. I just sat there. But I was gone. I mean, you could tell if you looked. When I'm having a what they call a complex partial, you know what that is? You know what that is, right?
I do, but if you could explain it to the people out there.
Okay. There are many kinds of seizures, and of course the seizures it's important where they are in your brain. You know, like if the part of your brain that affects smell, you will smell things that aren't there. There's a very famous story of George Gershwin, who was having dinner one night with part of his band, and he kept saying, "God, you know, it smells terrible in this restaurant, just terrible." And they were saying, "No, it doesn't. Everything is okay." And then he went to a doctor sometime later and found out he had a brain tumor, and that's what took him out. So wherever the damage is causes whatever that part of the brain does. And in my case, it's a visual thing because it's in the visual cortex. And in particular, it's not just the visual cortex, but it's in the memory section of the visual cortex. So my memories aren't reliable. For instance, I couldn't testify that I went on a trip on a spaceship, you know, with some aliens. That would not be acceptable because of my epilepsy. It would be immediately eliminated, because they would figure, well, he just had a seizure and this is just a hallucination. Unfortunately, really, I didn't really care anyway. You know, I mean, I was so involved in my own world that I spent most of my time walking alone. For some reason, my parents never cared where I went or what I did. I mean, from a very young age, at 6 or 7, I wouldn't let my daughter walk anywhere at 6 or 7 by herself. I used to walk out the front door, and then Caron and I would just go on these long walks. I mean, miles. I'd be gone all day. You know,
and she would be with you, and she'd talk to you.
Yes.
Be present there, because one of the fascinating things is there's a lot of people involved in my work that are particularly interested in lucid dreaming, REM intrusion, these kind of things. And one of the things that you mention in your book very early on is that there were two things that really fascinated me: your encounters with the red-eyed creatures, which presumably were not emanations of Charon, they were something different. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what they seem to be?
Um, I had some what they call in psychology night terrors. I used to have night terrors.
So sleep paralysis in effect, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And now Caroline would take me out of those things, but I started seeing red eyes on almost every vision that I had. Most of the beings had red eyes, but these weren't negative images. Some were bad, some were negative, like the wolves that ate me. I don't, that story that I wrote
Yeah,
about.
which we'll touch on later. I want to touch on that.
Right. Now those wolves all had red eyes, but Caron never had red eyes that I can remember. I don't think so. But the red eye encounters began almost immediately after I came out of the coma. I mean, I remember being at home. I was listening to Tchaikovsky's violin concerto. I was about 6, and loving it. I just fell in love with the violin. I just loved it. So I started playing the violin at about 6 or 7. And the room just filled with these red eyes.
Because this is an interesting trope, because one of the previous guests on this show, and somebody that I'm planning to get on for future conversation, is Dr. Gary Vasey. And Gary focuses on these particular ideas and these visions that people have. And he is particularly interested in the whole red-eyed thing and the symbolism of the red eyes. And it seems to me almost that this is like a kind of REM intrusion, sleep paralysis type thing, that these creatures seem to rise up from somewhere else. And to say it's all subconscious doesn't answer anything. It's like the point you made before. People turn around and say it's an hallucination. And my response to that was always, okay, then explain hallucinations. Because Oliver Sacks, the great British American psychiatrist, his final book was called Hallucinations. And in that he discusses, when we say that, all we're saying is you're seeing something that other people aren't seeing. Doesn't mean it's not real. It just means it's not real for other people. Now, the thing is with your life, what has always intrigued me is the way in which these things seem to impinge upon this reality. And I was rereading some of your stuff a few days ago, and I was amazed, for instance, the way your life was saved by the hand on the shoulder as you were trying to cross a road. If you can explain that a little bit, because that's something that saved your life, that was something you did not know was going to happen, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Caron saved my life on many occasions, but especially even benign ones like that one. I was walking to junior high school and, going blithely through the universe like I always did, and paying very little attention to anything or anyone or anything. And the light turned green, so I started to step off into the street, and something grabbed my shoulder from the back and pulled me back. And just as I was pulled back, I mean, it was visceral. I mean, it was really, I was pulled. I thought it was a seizure. And I got pulled back, and a car went right around the corner. So it ran the red light. It would have killed me. There's no question about it. That car would have run me right down. And like most emotions that I have, I don't feel the emotion of it for a very long time. I don't know if that's because of the damage to my cortex or what it is, or whether it's just a defense mechanism because of the abuse that my father gave me, and my mother too. But for some reason, it takes me a very long time to feel anything, happiness or terror, because you got to understand that when you're a child and a creature comes into the room that's as big as the room, and looks kind of like a giant tree and talks to you, which used to happen to me quite a bit. That's a terrifying experience if you don't know what it is. But it can be benign if you think, well, everybody must see these things because I see them. I remember one time I was at Forest Lawn, which is a cemetery here, but it has a lot of art and it's a very famous place. We used to go there all the time after church. And I saw this man cleaning up and he called me over. And so we started to talk. I was probably 7 or 8, 9 maybe. And so I was talking to the man, and he seemed to know a lot about me. He knew where I came from. He asked me how my grandfather was. He asked me, is my grandfather? He asked me a lot of personal questions that I couldn't figure out how in the world he even knew this stuff. How are my legs? Because that's where I was beaten most of the time on my legs. I had really bad scars. And even today I have psychological scars. My legs ache, and it's psychosomatic. Anyway, so he just said, have no fear, enjoy the day. It was all positive. And then my mother said, will you get over here? Will you just get over here? Because I was always going off talking to these unknown, unseen things. And so I said to her, I was talking to that man over there. I mean, didn't you see him? He's right there. He's standing right there. And she said, there is nobody standing right there. I said, Mom, there is somebody. That man is standing right there. Don't you see? He's got a brush and he's cleaning that floor. Don't you see that? And she said, there is nobody. She just get really mad. I thought I was going to get hit. And so I just went, okay, she doesn't see it. She doesn't see it. And that's when I got the message, shut up about what happens to you. Because people are not in the same dimension that you are when you're doing this. So just shut up. Carolyn didn't tell me to do that. I just decided to do that. And so I stopped telling my parents anything that I ever felt or saw or experienced. So, and when I'd had grand mal seizures at home, since I was supposed to be cured, since I had the epilepsy exorcism, I was supposed to be cured, I would have it, and sometimes you lose body control. So I would wet my hands and stuff, and I'd change my clothes, and I'd hide in a closet. And I'd change all my clothes in the closet. And then I would come out and try to be normal. And when you're post-ictal, you're not really normal. You're not playing in the same dimension that everybody else is playing in.
Because this, again, there's so many things here that intrigue me. Now, a few years ago, there's a guy called Michael T. Halliwell who wrote a book on mythical friends for children, and he called them quasi-corporal companions, or QCCs. Now, in my latest book, I have a section on QCCs, and I link them very much to some of your experiences, because to me it seems that many children see these friends and these entities and everything. But for somebody like yourself, because your doors of perception, because of your experience of epilepsy, your doors of perception are wider. And whatever these are, they can come through far more regularly. Now, effectively, your descriptor there reminds me of something I've written about called Charles Bonnet syndrome, where people who are older see things that are out there. And it's as if these entities are always there. And it's just that we can't see them because, Sarah and I are going to be doing an event, hopefully in the future, about Plato's Cave, and the idea of you're almost the individual who's broken the confines of the cave, and you've gone out from the cave, gone past the fire, and you're standing at the opening of the cave and you're seeing the world as it really is. And then you go back in to tell your fellow prisoners what you've seen. And as you rightly say, you very quickly realize you can't be saying these things because people will think you're mad or you're insane. And it's not, because, for instance, the fact that you were saved by being pulled back, that says so much. That was a physiological effect. It wasn't created by you because you didn't know the car was coming. And even if you could, how could you have pulled yourself backwards? So it means these entities can have a physical effect. Although they may not be physically here, they have a physical effect on matter because they pulled you back. Now, to me, what then subsequently happened to you, that when you started then the first time in May 1957, when you first went to Zelkon, you could see that you were moving from this liminal area, you know, what the al-mithral that the Sufis talk about, the kind of overlapping area. You'd moved through the liminal area and you'd gone somewhere completely different, and suddenly you were somewhere completely extraordinary. And the way you describe it in the book is incredible. You describe the smell of the newly mown grass and everything, and then you're just suddenly somewhere else. Can you tell a little bit about this? Because this was your first introduction to this alternate place called Zelkon.
Yeah, I used to, I always had the job of mowing the lawn. That was my job, okay? I mean, I guess they figured I was qualified to mow the lawn. And so I would mow the lawn, and you know how that smell is when the grass is cut, you know. And I would lay there, and the yard was like on the top of a hill, and it would go down the hill, and the sun the sun would come up in the after, and we'd be going down in the afternoon. It would just be lovely, and certain times of the year, Orion comes up pretty quick. Other times of the year, you can't see Orion from this hemisphere at all. And so I was looking at the constellation, and Charon came to me and said, "You see that third star in Orion's belt, the one that is not in line with the other two?" And I went, "Yeah, I see it." And she said, "You're from a planet that is in orbit around that star." And you know, I didn't have any names. She didn't say Betelgeuse or any of that. And she didn't give me names. She just said that star. And that was the first time that Zelkon had been mentioned. And she made the word up. I mean, I didn't make it up. She made it up. She said it was called Zelkon. And then later on, we used to go there on a regular basis. And the sunlight on Zelkon is half what it is here. So a bright day there is like early evening here. And the oceans are these beautiful, incredible blues. They're just, and they shimmer. It's just an amazing place. It's just an amazing place. The most of what I experienced early was the gravel on the surface, and for some reason we always went there, and I didn't have any shoes. Don't ask me why. I don't explain this shit. I just tell you about it. I didn't have any shoes, and my feet were hurting, and I kept telling Charon, "Hey, this is hurting my feet. These rocks are really hard on my feet." And we just went up a little bit off the surface. And she said, you don't have to be on the surface. You can go as high or as far as you want to go. There's nothing stopping you or both of us from flying over and seeing other parts of the planet. And I went, okay. So over time, I would see all of these pairs of people, a person and their companion, like Caroline and I. And I said, can we go talk to them? And she said, no, you can't. Those people are on their own personal journeys here, and we can't interfere with that relationship. And I found out years later that all of those beings with their companions were me from different dimensions at
Wow.
different times in different worlds from different places, but they were all me.
So in other words, you couldn't speak to them because they were you.
Right.
With Charon in different, so you were seeing them in different aspects and different time. That is extraordinarily, wow.
Yeah, it was an amazing revelation that I didn't get until, well, I was probably in my 20s or something like that, when I was going to Zelcon a lot and doing a lot of work there. And she kind of gives me the information when she thinks I'm ready to understand or accept, or that I can move that direction. I don't get information that I don't get, that I don't understand. Like, I remember I bought a book on relativity without looking at it from a friend of mine. And when I opened the book, it was all equations. I didn't know what the hell those equations were. So I took the book back and I said, do you have another book that's about relativity but doesn't have all the equations? And he said, oh, well, yeah, and it's written by Einstein. I went, well, let me have that book. And then I could understand it, because I don't know what those equations mean. Well, the same thing happened with Caroline. She would give me information that I had moved my consciousness forward enough that I could accept. And the idea that I had not only were these people, these pairs from present day, but some of them are from the past. Some of them were from a million years in the future. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I'm just getting now that I didn't get, and I'm 77 now, so I'm just getting.
Do you know, there are so many links here to so many different people, because I'm thinking your experiences remind me of your close neighbor, Philip K. Dick, when he was alive. I mean, particularly because Philip K. Dick became profoundly interested in the I Ching and everything else as well. But I'm sitting here thinking, one of a future program we need to do is for me to introduce you to a friend of mine called Pia Rubesa. And Pia Rubesa is a Croatian Canadian inventor. And the things you were describing there remind me so much of Pia, and we will get him on as a future guest, because he, for instance, he informed me only a few days ago on Facebook that he's just recently got his first American patent for one of his inventions. And he has an entity like your Charon, who's been with him since he had a near-death experience on a beach in Croatia when he was about 7 or 8. And this entity channels through him, and he writes things down in massive books. And then the entity will turn around to him and say, right, okay, you don't understand book 3, page 114, but go in there now and you'll understand it. And he reads it and he understands it. And he invents things. That's what he does. He invents things and he knows and he understands. So the resonance here, and I think for a future show, us and you and him, we could make so many links here as to what is really going on. So, and I think just very quickly as well, another point you made there was about this kind of timelessness of Zelkon and the way in which everything is concurrent. And this is exactly what Philip K. Dick argued when he called his orthogonal time, and the idea
Right.
that there's times at right angles from these that we can persevere and go into. So clearly, you know, although I've known your work for years, what you were just saying then was absolutely extraordinary. So thank you for that. And one of the things that zooms perfectly into is something that has always astounded me, was the way in which, when you were in an altered state of consciousness, you saw the eagle and you saw a reflection in the eye of the eagle. Can you explain a little bit about that and how extraordinary that was in terms of seeing your own future self as an artist?
Well, a couple of times, um, I used to go to the mountain. You know, you know that I've described the mountain here.
Yes.
That the Chumash lived on for thousands of years, that were completely wiped out by the Spanish. And that doesn't get much coverage, interestingly enough.
Is
But
this the place of the four stars? Is this your place
Yes.
of the four stars?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Stony Point, it's called. It's now a park. It used to belong to this lady. And there's a railroad track right to it. And the bums used to get off the train and sleep on these rocks. But I found it years ago. And so you have to climb up to get to the place of the four stars. And somebody had painted these four stars on these four rocks. And I thought, no, that can't just be an accident. You know, there's a reason they did that. So I decided to meditate in the middle of it. And so things began to, I started a lot of journeys on the mountain. Now this is years later. This is after the El Segundo Park, encounter with the elves and all the rest of it.
Which we have to come back to. We have to come
Yes.
back to that.
Right.
Okay.
And now the question you asked me was what? Oh, it was about the reflection
Yeah.
of the energy.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, everything that my mysticism is based on rocks, trees, water, air. It's almost all organic, real stuff that metamorphizes into something else. It's just the way it starts out. A tree is just a tree. And then all of a sudden it opens. A bird is just a bird. And then the bird expands and gets huge. And then I go into the bird. I'm not outside the bird. I'm in the bird. And the bird and I are one thing. I don't talk about that much because I didn't want to end up in an institution. And there were some times when I didn't know what was happening to me. Like when I went into the eye of the bird, and then I saw my own future. If you remember, I told you about the fact that I saw this room,
Mm.
and the room had paintings all on the walls, and I was sitting at my desk and I was drawing in a journal, and I hadn't started the journals yet. And I was a musician. I wasn't an artist. I didn't even know I couldn't even do a stick drawing. I mean, I really didn't know how to do anything. My brother was the artist. I went to music school. He went to art school. And so the room expanded like it always does. It starts from this dot, and then it just goes like that. And then it can get as big as infinity if it wants to. but the room was about, well, maybe 10 times the size of this room that I'm sitting in right now. And like these paintings and stuff that I have behind me, the room was full of art. And Caron suddenly appeared and said, I said, who did all this art? And Caron said, well, you have already done it. It was already done. I said, what are you talking about? I've already done it. I haven't already done anything. I play the violin, I play the viola, and I play the piano. I don't do drawings. I could get pretty snippy. When you have a friend, you can, you're very familiar with this friend, and this friend has been with me since childhood. So, she would be pretty tough on me about not taking things serious. And she said, I want you to concentrate on what is happening here. She always got serious when things were serious. When things were not so serious, she didn't care. Joking around was fine. Because, there is a Buddha of humor. There is a Buddha that's about humor. So anyway. So I said, okay. I'll look. And I said, wow, they're pretty incredible pieces. These. And I said, that's really funny. There's something familiar about all of them. And she said, yeah, how? I said, I don't know, like I've already done these things, and this is just a record of them or something. But I don't draw, so I couldn't have done it. And she said something that was very odd. She said, I'm the one who gives gifts to you. I went, wait a minute, what's that mean? She says, you'll find out later. Right now, just enjoy this room. So we spent quite a bit of time, and I saw somebody sitting at a desk. And I said, and his back was to me. And he had long hair, like I do now. But I was in the military at the time. So I had very short hair like yours. And she said, look at the man sitting at the desk. And I said, okay, I'm looking at the man. What do you want me to see? And then she said, you can't approach that figure. Just stay where you are and look at the man. So I went, okay, I'll stay and I'll look at the man. I could be pretty snippy myself. And all of a sudden, just for a moment, I found myself the man sitting at the desk. And I was old. My hands were old. I looked at my hands and they were old like they are now. And then it was over like that. I was back looking at the man sitting there. And she said, that's it for today. That's it. That's a lot of information. You just don't know it. Remember, I told you, I don't feel things until a month from now. And then all of a sudden it'll hit me what I saw. And then I just collapse. I cry. I meditate. I walk. I do whatever I can do to obviate the pain or the wonder. You know how scary wonder is? Wonder is so scary because it's not what you're taught the world is like. The world is not wonder unless you experience it. And if you're if you're at your favorite rock band and maybe you're hearing Pink Floyd for the first time and you like the way they sound and it's wonderful. That wonder feeling is so narcotic that you want it back. You want to get that wonder back, and you'll pay any price, just about. It's a good way to get addicted to drugs. You'll pay any price to get that wonder back. And she always just gave me just enough so I never got that addiction to it. I wasn't addicted to the wonder of it. I was just immersed in it. I loved it, but I didn't want to escalate the experience. So I was seeing my own future, obviously, and within about a week, I started doing stick drawings and small journals, and mostly I was writing because I wasn't an artist, so I was just writing. I wrote down that experience and all that stuff, and then I started with the first journal, which is right there, and now there are 7,000 images in these journals, and I keep a record of every experience. So when I pull it out and look at it, I go right back to what it was. So the image on the page is a real thing. It's like this computer taking me to something that I've saved. So like say I want to see this conversation. So I bring it up on YouTube. It's just like that in these books. I open the book, it's 1978, and there I am, live, just like it was yesterday. And I feel it. The way you can know that it's not just a hallucination is that it pulls your body. Your body is pulled. You feel it's visceral. You feel the movement into wherever you're going, the past, present, future, whatever it is, you feel that movement. And you can't, once you start that process, you can't stop it. It pulls you into it itself. So when I look at an old journal, I'm still working on stuff that I did 20, 30 years ago. If I open it, I'm still working on that. It's not done. It really never ends.
It almost reminds me here of the writings of people like Rodney Collin and Peter Ouspensky.
Ouspensky, I used to read a lot.
Oh, because you know then Ouspensky's concepts, and one of the things that Ouspensky and his followers were fascinated by was the implications of Minkowski's block universe. And in fact, the British playwright J.B. Priestley wrote a play called Time and the Conways based upon a similar concept, that we are the linga seria, the long body, and that we don't exist. We are never one thing. We are a continuum of our whole lives. And every incident is just a slice of the greater something than we are. And in which case, talking about your model of the orthogonal time again, that you can move in orthogonal time and then move back into an earlier version of yourself, which is, I think, what you're trying to describe there, the idea of being pulled into. And that was amazing. I just enthralling description of what it must be like to be you and to be in this kind of almost timeless place that you can move outside of. And I think, one of the things that when I've written about you and your experiences is all the time I'm struck by the profound shamanic symbolism of the things that happen to you, the way in which, you shamanically travel. And you call yourself a modern day shaman, and it's so true. Everything you say, you have a way of delivering information that just, and I'm sure Sarah is sitting there in exactly the same way. I'm just enthralled by the things you're saying and just soaking it in and wanting more and more of it. And I'm very keen now to move back, because you talked about this before, you know, your incident at El Segundo, and just the entities that you saw initially. And particularly, I was very amused when you mentioned that you saw a white rabbit, because my little group were fascinated by Lewis Carroll and the implications of Lewis Carroll. And we were going to, with Sarah, weren't we? We were going to be trying to do an event based upon Lewis Carroll and the symbolism of the white rabbit. But then what happened in your incident with the Minotaur, and what happened then? Because again, the Minotaur symbolism, Sarah and I are really into the whole Minotaur labyrinth thing and the whole Crete Minoan symbolism. So can we just sit and listen to you describe what happened to you that day? Because this is extraordinary, folks, absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, what happened with I had been, the 60s, I had been on a drug that my doctor gave me. In 1961, I was shaking so bad that I couldn't write my name, and I couldn't play the instrument. I could not do it. I couldn't control my body for some reason. And my doctor, who was an extraordinary man, he went to Cambridge. He has 3 doctorates, one in medicine, one in philosophy, and one in music.
Wow.
All from Cambridge. So he and I hit it off big time. And he gave me Valium. He said, well, there's this new drug. Nobody had ever heard of it. And it'll calm you down. So from in the 1960s to the 1970s, I was on Valium. I started out at 2.5 milligrams 3 times a day. And at the end of the 60s, I was taking 40 milligrams a day. Now, that much Valium would inebriate. I mean, people would just be decimated by that. I mean, that's a lot of drugs. And it did 2 things. One, it got me through the military. 2, it got me through college. Because there's no way I would have gotten through the 60s without Valium. I just would, but it blocked all of my experiences. I no longer had any visions. Heroin was gone. Everything was gone. I only had a few incidents in the military that are.
Was Charon gone as well? Was Charon
Yes,
gone as well? Oh,
yes.
right. Okay.
Everything was blocked by this drug. And so my life became very extroverted. And the introversion part was just the creative. My major was composition. So I was working on compositions all the time. And then I was playing in piano bars to pay for school and all kinds of stuff like that. So I sort of became like everybody else. And it was something I didn't recognize. I mean, I didn't quite, but it was working. I could work, I could play at night, I could go to school, I had a lot of energy, and I got through the Army, I got through all of it. And for some reason, they never did a test to find out that their soldier was on such a strong drug. But anyway, that doesn't matter. The point was that I got out of the Army the same year I graduated from college, which was 1970, 71, right in there. And I had a daughter. She was like, a year old at the time, maybe 2. And we used to go to this park in El Segundo. And every once in a while I go by myself. So 2 things happened. One, I decided to stop taking Valium. I just stopped. Now, there's a movie called Diary of a Mad Housewife or something like that. If you can look it up. It's about some lady who gets off Valium and she just goes wild and it just drives her crazy. I never had any symptoms of any of that. I just put the thing back. I didn't do anything dramatic like dump it down the drain. I just put it back in the shelf, and I just said to myself, I don't really need this. I don't need this anymore. This had its function, it's done. So I put it back. So then I went to the park alone early in the morning. I used to like to go early in the morning. El Segundo, the town, is not very far from the beach. So you get a lot of fog off the water. Really a beautiful little place. And so I was walking. There was a row of trees and there was a walkway. And I was walking in this row of trees, and I saw this white rabbit. You know, I mean, he had a watch. He had a green coat. Like there's a painting of him right there. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. He didn't say, I'm late, I'm very for an important day. He didn't say that. He just was there. And then I saw elves and every kind of creature that you would think of as a childhood creature that aren't scary, you know, elves and leprechauns and these female, nude female creatures, not sexual, just nude with wings, like fairies. And they were flying all over the place. It was incredible. It's just incredible and shocking because I remember I hadn't seen anything in 10 years. And they didn't say anything. They just were all over the place. Running here, running there, jumping here, having fun. They were having fun. They were having fun at my expense. Thank you very much.
Just can I stop you there very quickly? You must continue section, but the machine elves, Terence McKenna, DMT entities, it's so similar, isn't it? Sorry, I just thought I'd come in there. Sorry.
Yeah, I read that in your book, and I was thinking about, yeah, okay. I never put that together. You put that together for me because I didn't put that together. So anyway, they were laughing and they were just having one hell of a great time. And I thought, okay, you know, what's going on here? Why am, and because I see them just like I see this room. I mean, they're solid. I can touch them. It isn't like they're just ethereal. I can actually touch them. I can undo his nest. He wouldn't let me do that, but and then I got dizzy and I fell and hit my head on this this little thing that container of water that was a fountain, and I hit my head and passed out. And I think I probably passed out, and it wasn't because of hitting my head. I think it was just the reverse. I think I passed out and hit my head. And then I came out of it, and all of a sudden, to quote your book, the doors of perception, and to quote Huxley, the doors of perception just opened. All of a sudden, Perron was back. Everything was back. All the drugs that had stopped my relationship were gone, and everything that was inside of me was now available, but the shaking was also gone, which is very interesting. My neurologist doesn't have an explanation for it. Well, they don't have much explanation about anything, but I mean, anyway, I don't want to get into that. So I wrote that down in I had one little tiny journal that I had. So I wrote down that experience. I couldn't draw anything, so I just wrote about it. You know, white rabbit and elves and all that stuff. later on, I did a painting of it. Like I did a painting of that whole series. You know, so I did one of the elves, I did one of the rabbit, I did one of the fairies, I did one of the park itself. So all those paintings, they're all on Facebook. Because I put my experiences on Facebook every day. Those are my experiences. I'm not, if you want to know what Myron is, all you have to do is open Facebook. I don't hold anything back. Not anymore. I'm too old and nobody gives a shit. So, anyway, so it all started again from there. And within about a year, we moved to the San Fernando Valley and away from the beach. And guess where we moved? We moved to Chatsworth, which is famous for movies. They've been shooting films here forever, ever since the silent era, because of the way the rocks and the topography of the mountains look here. They are magical, magical, magical. It's all sandstone. I was at the Natural History Museum, and I asked the lady there, the scientist, I said, how did Chatsworth get formed? Is it wind? Because it's sandstone. And she said, oh, no. There was an ocean there for 10 million years. And what you're seeing is what the ocean left when the ocean dissipated. I said, yeah, but it's kind of high. She said, well, it's been pushed up by earthquakes and all kinds of things. But, so I went, oh, okay, I get it. And then, of course, I found out later that the mountain that I discovered, actually, Charon took me there. I was at my new house. I had a new studio, a new room that I could start doing things in. I started painting the walls. And I wasn't very good at it, but I was starting to paint the walls and stuff. And I started my first big journal, making drawings in it. And Carolyn said, get up. We have to go somewhere. Okay. I don't argue with her, that's for sure. So we got in my truck, because at the time I was driving a truck. And the mountain was really close. It was like 4 miles away. Stony Point, it's called. If you Google Stony Point, you won't have any trouble finding it. There must be 1,000 pictures of it. Or Chatsworth, or any of that. There's just tons of pictures because there were 5 major studios that had studios in Chatsworth. And as a matter of fact, the Manson family lived in one of those studios. Whoa. Spawn Ranch is only 300 or 400 yards from Stony Point. I mean, it's very close. I met them.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I met them. And I didn't know it was them. I mean, they were just hippies. You know, I mean, I used to, my brother was involved with, he was married to Ellen Geer, and Will Geer was an actor who played in lots of films and was blackballed by the House Un-American Activities Committee. And he started a theater called Theater Britannicum. And later on, I would write music for that theater. But they did Shakespeare and Aeschylus and you name it. They would do it live in this amphitheater that they created. And so this whole area, the topography of this whole area is amazing. And of course, the Chumash lived here for thousands of years. So their mythology, I was wondering one day, I was sitting on the mountain and I saw an Indian walk by. You know, I mean, an Indian, and in full dress. And that's not part of my mythology, if you understand what I mean. I'm not into Indians or any of that stuff. But this Indian walked by, and I blew it off at first, but then they kept coming back. And to get to your thing about uh, the Minotaur, one night, Caron said to me, get up. I'd worked all day. I was working at a labor job in telecommunications that I'd learned in the military. And I was tired. And he said, get up. She said, get up and let's go to the mountain. Okay. So I told my wife at the time, I'm going to the mountain, so I'll be back whenever I'm back. So I went up there and it was dark. I used to go up there at night and there's mountain lions and snakes and you name it, bears and foxes. And wonderful. It's all wonderful. So I went to the mountain and then I climbed to the top. It's quite a climb, but I got so I could do it like that. I have muscle memory today. When we were shooting the second film, the one that we won the St. Louis Film Festival on,
Mm-hmm.
those guys are half my age, and they had one hell of a time getting up there, and I just walked right up, because my legs are used to that climb because I've climbed it thousands of times. Well, anyway, so I got to the top, and I said to Caron, what are we doing here? And she said, just sit down and wait. And here comes a Minotaur. Now, this Minotaur was big. I mean, he had to be 8 or 9 feet tall at least. He must have weighed 300 pounds. So he could sure as hell tear me to pieces without any problem whatsoever. So he appeared, and all of a sudden I got this rage in me that I wanted to destroy him. I wanted him dead. And all of a sudden I had a knife in my hand, big, long knife, and I was crazy with anger, and I wanted this creature dead. And there's no reason. You got to understand, there was no reason that this creature was benign. He was just standing there. So I went after him. Well, then he ran. And then he was running through the brush and down the hill, and like playing with me. And it made me madder and madder and madder, because every time I would fall and I would get scrapes on my body, and I couldn't catch him, and he'd laugh. He had this bull head, and he'd just sort of roar and laugh. If you've seen Legend, it was kind of like that guy. But anyway, so finally, we came back to the top of the hill, and he stopped. And I stabbed him right in the chest. And then I kept stabbing him, and he didn't resist. Now, he could have torn me to pieces. He didn't resist. I cut him into pieces. And then I built a fire, and I cooked those parts of him. I ate everything that I could eat of him. I ate his body. I ate his genitals. I ate everything I could eat, except the horns and all the hard stuff, all that, and the bones. I couldn't eat those. And my arms were all cut from all the briars and running around the mountain, and I was exhausted, and I sort of just passed out, and woke up about dawn, I guess. And the fire was out, and I didn't see any evidence of anything, parts that were left over or anything. So I went home, and I took the day off, I called in sick, and I slept. And then I called a friend of mine who was my mentor and told him the story I just told you. And he said, that's over my head. I've got somebody you need to talk to, and he's my therapist. But he's not just any therapist. He's a very special poet, and you need. I said, well, Bill, I don't have any money. I can't afford a therapist. He said, I'll give you my appointment. It's on Tuesday. You just show up to the appointment. I'll pay for it, and you tell him what you just told me, and then let's hear what he has to say about it. So I told him the same story that I just told you. And it was remarkable what he said. He said, well, so what did you do with the energy that the Minotaur gave you? And I, wait a minute, what are you talking about? He said, well, you said he appeared to you, that he was stronger than you, bigger than you, he could have torn you to pieces. Yeah, you had to chase him around a little bit. But then he stood still and let you cut him into pieces and then eat him. You ate him. You ingested all of his energy. So what did you do with it? I went, well, nothing. I said, well, that's really a shame. And I went, this is the guy I want to work with. I mean, he was right on the fucking money. I mean, it was just, I'd never told an event to any therapist or anyone who got it, who was ahead of me. He was ahead of me. And so I started showing him, I started bringing my journals to the sessions, and then we would talk about the divisions. So that's the Minotaur. That was the beginning of this ingestion of power.
And then it happened 2 years later. Then it was done on you by the red-eyed wolves, wasn't it? In Culver City.
Yeah, later on, years later, I was driving to an appointment in the morning, and traffic here can be really terrible. I'm sure that's true in London and any big city. So I have this thing about being on time. I'm just focused on, I want to be on time. A friend of mine that's a salesman says, if you're late to an appointment, what you're really telling your client is that you're more important than the client is. So you start out at a negative. So I got that in my training for sales. Well, anyway, so I got there really early, and I went into the cemetery. You get off at this road called Slauson, and on one side of it, which used to just be hills and used to be part of the studio of MGM, but I got sold off and then built into buildings and offices. To the left of it is a cemetery, and it's a Catholic cemetery. So Catholics have goddesses. It's exactly what I was looking for. So I turned into the cemetery, and there was a place that there was a Mary standing there, and there was this shell. It was just a beautiful little sculpture with water, to comfort people who were grieving. And I thought, well, I got 2 hours. I might as well just sit here. So I was sitting there minding my own business, and all of a sudden, I was in a kind of cave. I don't know how else to say it. It was like a cave with water in it. And this is a very important story. This is probably one of the most important stories. And you'll see why later. Um, this boatman came, not Charon, not that boatman, but a boatman came and said, "Get in the boat." So I got in the boat, and I'm in this tunnel, and I was in this boat, and I'm traveling down this river. It isn't the river Styx, it's just a river. And, or maybe it was. Anyway, I was traveling down this river, and in the sides of the walls were faces, and they weren't dead. They were alive, but they couldn't speak. And there's an old expression: "If you will not speak, I will consider making you up." And I was sort of there making up the reality that I was doing, and the boatman said, "Stop doing that. Concentrate on what's going on here." So we sailed along, and as we got closer to the destination that the boatman was taking me to. Oh, and by the way, Charon was not here. She was not involved in this, and for a reason. And all of a sudden, there were harpies everywhere. I mean, these harpies were big, magnificent creatures. They were just incredible, but they wanted one thing. They wanted to tear my flesh off my body and eat it. They wanted to destroy me utterly. I could feel it. They didn't have to say anything, and they were screeching and all that kind of stuff. But they didn't. Something was keeping them from doing it. And when I say something, I mean an energy was saying to them, "Leave this guy alone. He's not for you." So they'd come down, and then they would fly away, kind of like, "Oh, damn it, I can't eat this guy." So we come to a dock. The boatman says, "Get out." And actually didn't say out, get out, it just pointed. And it's really dark. So I got out, and I walked, and I saw this huge door. I mean, huge. It must have been 60 feet tall, and it was made out of like bronze, except it wasn't bronze, but it looked like bronze. And I could open it. I mean, I noticed that it wasn't heavy. Now there's no way it could be that light. So I opened the door, and there was this stadium full of souls, of people. So there must have been 1 million people there. I mean, they were screaming and yelling and in revelry. That's the only word I can use. They were in revelry. And I was kind of like overtaken by the energy. It was so strong. And then off in the distance, here comes this man, another kind of minotaur kind, except a regular human. Except he was big too. He was like 15, 20 feet tall. But he was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. I had never seen anything that looked like this man. He was just spectacular. And he walked up to me, and then here I am, about like this, and he's about like that. And so his voice was big, and I was small. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Your boatman brought me." And he said, "That wasn't my boatman, and he had no business bringing me here." And I said, I don't understand. You know, I mean, the boatman came, I got in at its direction, you know, and I'm here, and this place is like unbelievably wonderful. And he said, this place is not for you. Not only is it not for you, you do not belong here, nor have you ever belonged here, ever, ever, in any way, incarnation, it doesn't matter. You do not belong here. And I suddenly realized what I was looking at. I was looking at a demon, the most powerful demon I have ever seen. And this demon was telling me, unlike my parents who were telling me I was demon possessed, and all of those years of thinking I was demon possessed, this demon was telling me, you're not demon possessed. You don't belong here. And then he got sort of friendly and he walked me to the boat. And the boat all of a sudden appeared, right? I mean, this guy is a demon. He can do whatever he wants. And the boat appeared and he said, I want you to leave and I want you to never come back, ever. You do not belong here. This is not a place for your soul. So get in the boat and leave. Boy, I got on the boat. But I never felt so good in my life. The demon had told me I was not demon possessed. I'm feeling it now. I'm almost sick because of the way I felt. I was crying and I felt like I've been redeemed. You want to talk about redemption, which is a big deal in Christianity. I was totally redeemed by this experience that I never expected. I never expected, because I always thought of myself in the back of my mind that I was demon possessed, that I was a very strange, odd, because I like dark things. I like Frankenstein and Wolfman and, you know, all the things from the 50s, all those movies from the 50s. And I liked all of the EC comics. I don't know if you know those, but
Oh yeah, used to love them.
I have them all here, about 100 of them.
You want
Anyway.
you want to check the writings of Jeffrey Kripal, who is one of the previous guests on this show, who's written about the occult and mysticism in American comics. But that's an aside. But you need to check that out. But anyway, sorry.
All
Please
right,
go on.
so I got back to the cave where I started. There's actually, it was a cave. There are a lot of caves on the mountain, but they're not big, but they're, you know, little caves. So I was there, and then Karen was there, and she said, "Did you get the message?" You know, that's pretty benign, right? After what I went through, that seemed kind of like, the only answer is, yeah, I got the message. So, yeah, I got the message. And she said, I hope you did. I hope you got the message.
Wow.
Because the message was for you and for only you.
Extraordinary.
Just you. And so I went home. Remember, I told you I don't feel things until way later. And about a week later, I just fell apart. I mean, and these were the years I was drinking a lot in these years. It's kind of self-medicating because I was in an industry that I didn't belong in, you know, and it was a difficult time, but I was also living this other life. So I was really schizophrenic in that sense that I was living two realities. I had a suit and tie that I wore to work every day. I was a vice president of a corporation. I had 500 people reporting to me. And I worked 60, 70 hours a week. We had every studio in California. Paramount, the Burbank Studios, Disney, all of them were our customers because we did telephones. So we had, we had like 20,000 phones just at the Burbank lot. I had 30 technicians just working on the Burbank lot. Well, that's an enormous amount of time. But when that was over, I'd come home and go to the mountain. And I'd go up there and I'd be exhausted. But the moment I stepped foot on the mountain, the exhaustion would go away and my energy levels would just go through the roof. And then sometimes I would stay home and paint. That's because I was already painting by this time.
Because that's the perfect point now to probably bring Sarah in, I'm sure, because she tells me she's been making lots of notes. Sarah, do you want to make any comments or anything from this extraordinary?
There are a few things that I really am interested in. And one of them is, I love the continuity that you describe after 10 years of Valium, that as soon as you came off the Valium, all the same kind of entities came back in as if you had like plugged up a hole. They were all fully formed and came out. I imagine in that 10 years, you got kind of used to not seeing any of them or thinking about them very much.
Yeah, in fact, I was mostly thinking about survival and getting through college. And you see, what happened was that I joined the reserves, the Army Reserve in 1964, which is another Charon thing. This is really another important Charon intervention. I was going to a junior college and I wasn't really getting anywhere because I just wasn't getting anywhere. And so Charon said, get up and let's go for a drive. So I went for a drive and I went down to the beach, went down the Pacific Coast Highway, which goes all the way through these 3 or 4 towns. And then I made a turn around where Palos Verdes is, and then there's a street called Crenshaw, and she said, turn left on Crenshaw. Come on, she knows the map. So I said, okay. She said, get some coffees, right? There's a coffee place. So I stopped because I'd been driving for like an hour and a half. So I got some coffee, and she said, look across the street. So I looked across the street. So what was across the street? The 163rd Signal Battalion was across the street. I remember back in 1964-65, everybody was trying to get into the National Guard or the reserves, so they didn't have to go to Vietnam. Okay, and so there were waiting lists to get into the reserves or to get into the National Guard. I mean, hundreds of people waiting. So you only had a few ways to be deferred. One was college, one was having children and being married, and the other was physical reasons. And I passed my physical. I have epilepsy and I passed my physical. So obviously they wanted cannon fodder and they couldn't care less whether I had epilepsy or not. Well, anyway, so she said, go over there. Just go over there. I went, okay. So I went over and I went into the day room and the sergeant was standing there and he said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, do you have any openings? Now you gotta understand, there weren't any openings. There were no openings of any kind. There were just lists of people waiting to get onto them. And he said, well, you know what's funny? We had a guy retire because it's a 6-year obligation. He rolled off his 6-year obligation. So yeah, we have an opening. And I said, can I can I join? And he said, yeah, sure. So we said, fill this out. So I filled this out, and the captain came out and gave me, and I took the same oath the President of the United States takes, the same oath. So I signed up, and um, the very next day, very next day, I got a call from a friend of mine that worked on the draft board, and she said, your number's up. You're going to be called up. I said, hey, I got news for you. I just joined the Army. She said, you did the right thing because you were going to get called up and go to Vietnam. No question about it. And so again, Caron took me on that journey, and it's in the book actually. And I went to the 163rd Signal Battalion, and it was a communications battalion. So I learned, that's where I learned communications for later on, that which would be my career. So she saved my life again, even though I had some other problems with it.
It makes me think as well, like hearing your story of that initial coma experience and then coming out and basically having amnesia. That must have been a really traumatic experience for a 4-year-old child to kind of suddenly wake up and not know who anyone was or why you were there. And I wonder if that trauma created that kind of division of yourself, your sense of self, into something. It reminds me of like the Jungian idea of the anima, like you manifested your own anima into a distinct personality. And I guess a bit like dissociative identity disorder, but you've created an actual personality there that has a life and a kind of intention of its own and a connection to everything as well. So it can give you memories and give you experiences and show you the future.
Yeah, the idea that just put yourself into a child's mind that has been adopted. Now this adopted child does not know the parents, doesn't know the siblings, doesn't know the schools, doesn't know anything. Now I wasn't in school at the time, but almost. I was 4 years old. So the very next year I would go to grammar school. And then so all these strangers, including my brother, I didn't know any of them. But Caron was there. That's the difference. Now, some therapists have said, Caron is just an undifferentiated part of yourself that, takes care of you. That its maturation is very advanced, and it's the thing that takes care of you. And I categorically resist that. I think that's psychological battle. I mean, believe me, I've read every book that Jung ever wrote. I read his whole Gesellschaft, so all of it, to find. And he says, I can quote you, that the personality produces the other, and the other and the personality are unified and work with each other. And it's a beautiful description, and it's in the Psychology and Alchemy book. I think it's in the Psychology and Alchemy book. And so as far as Caron being an undifferentiated part of myself, which is a nice, easy way to define it psychologically. I mean, it's, scientists just like to put things in categories. Well, that's just that, and that's this, and that's that. And I learned the hard way. I spent 10 years on the Epilepsy Foundation board, because I was an executive for a corporation. So I joined once I got diagnosed at 50. I didn't get diagnosed with epilepsy until I was 50.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
They thought what it thought was migraine, was an advanced form of migraine. That was because there are more hallucinations in migraine than there are in epilepsy.
Yeah, can I come in there actually? Because that's a
Yeah.
very important point. Because when I wrote Opening the Doors of Perception, I very much used you as the overlap person between migraine and epilepsy. You know, the idea that there's a continuum,
Yes.
and you know that a lot of the symptoms of extreme migraine are very similar to epilepsy and temporal lobe epilepsy, but there's more intensity as you move into that. I just thought I'd jump in there just for a second.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, I have migraine. Part of the postictal part of my seizure. I had, like, day before yesterday, I had a really bad seizure in the morning. So all day I couldn't do anything. And when the seizure's over, when it's postictal and it's over, it doesn't last very long. Um, I have migraine, and the migraine, it lasts, sometimes a couple of days. And then they usually come in groups of three. So I have the first big one, and then I have the next one, which isn't so big, and then they're like earthquakes. And then the last one is sort of benign. But I have migraines with every one of those. And then I have migraines without seizure, but I don't have headache. And I didn't know that you could, until I read Sachs's book on migraine. I didn't know you could have migraine without pain. Everybody was talking about all these headaches and stuff. Well, I don't have headaches. I do have a kind of altered state of consciousness. That's true, but I don't have headaches.
Yeah, that's similar to me. I have classic migraine, and I haven't had a real migraine headache for probably about 8 or 9 years, but I have the aura, and I get the aura state, which is
Right.
nothing like, the aura state that guys like yourself experience. But it's still a breakdown of my visual field, and I see the scotomas and I see the zigzags and everything else as well in
Right.
exactly the same way. And clearly there are areas here. Now I'm aware of time because we're probably running towards the end now in terms of this. Sarah, are there any final points you'd like to make?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's a few people brought up the.
Okay, would you like to?
Yeah. Okay, so Neela says dissociative identity disorder is yet another way through which psychiatry pathologized unexplained experiences. We must be careful when we use such terms. And I do agree with this kind of labeling is not necessarily very helpful, but dissociative identity disorder, or people that are said to experience that, I find them fascinating. And I don't think there's necessarily no reality to it. I just think that it's an insight into the extraordinary possibility of consciousness and reality perception, because especially when you consider something like someone that has multiple personalities can be allergic to something with one personality and have a strong, right. And if they switch personality, they're not. There's something very physical and real going on for those personalities that really exist. So I think that's why I brought it up, because I do find it very interesting, and there seems to be some parallels there.
Well,
yeah.
I think I think when you, for whatever reason, the universe decides that you have a way into a part of reality that isn't normally available to just anyone, because shamans are born, they're not made. You don't learn to be a shaman. You're either a shaman or you're not. And whatever you want to call it, they have all these definitions for everything. I mean, my God, I don't know how many neurologists I've seen. Maybe, well, I was on the board with 40 of them, and some of the best in the world. And but the fact is that regardless of how reductive you want to be on your diagnosis of what happens to me, my answer to that is you're just a child trying to figure out what's going on. The universe is vast. It's incredibly powerful. will come to get you if you open yourself or you are open to it. My soul that was replaced from childhood, that soul had a hard life. I've had a very hard life. But my job was to take that soul and take it to wherever it needed to go next. And that's what I've tried to accomplish. Okay. And the child that was born, that was taken, didn't need to do that. I wish we had more time because.
Well, we can go on if Sarah's willing to go on. I'm quite happy to go on. It's
I just wanted to tell you about some out of body stuff.
yeah.
And partly because I was reading your book and you were talking about out of body stuff. And I hadn't done anything with out of body stuff since the 60s, since Bob's book. Okay. And Karen said, it's time for you to go out of body and do it. I try again because I failed. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it back then. So Karen said, go downstairs and sit. And because I have a room downstairs that's completely black and I have art, it's full of goddesses and sculptures and stuff. And I meditate there every day for 2 hours. So I was down there and all of a sudden, I found myself walking the streets of my youth as myself, as at this age. Now, I used to do that, but when I tried to turn a corner or something, I had to get to the corner and then change my consciousness and go that way. I couldn't just walk around the corner like normal people do. I couldn't get that to work. And to me, that I was making it happen. I was taking that one little 5%, and that wasn't really out of body. That was really me just imagining this. Well, all of a sudden, I could go around the corner. Not only could I go around the corner, but I could walk and touch and feel the fence along the side of the walkway that I walked for 15 years. I could go into the old drugstore where I used to buy my horror comics and have a Coke and sit at the table. And I could also grow and change at will. Then on top, as I'll try to get this as short as I can.
No, don't worry. I mean, if you got as long as you would. Sarah, what are you like for time at the moment?
Fine for time.
I'm
Good.
fine.
Okay.
I don't know about Sarah, but I'm fine.
Good.
Anyway, so I thought, well, wait a minute. That's the first time I've been able to navigate things from the first person, from me. Not seeing myself do it, but actually doing it. So I could pick things up and I could put them down. I would see my hand pick up the cup and take a drink like this. Not see myself do it, but actually do it. Okay. To jump. Then I could go anywhere I wanted to go. So I went to Zelcon. And
just quickly, so could you go anywhere in time and space effectively, in time as well?
Yes,
So,
yes.
Wow, okay.
Yes. And even the future, remember, every time that Charon saved me from some event in the future, it either meant one or two things. Either the future already exists, or we've already lived it. Okay, I mean, there aren't very many. I mean, how in the world would Charon know what's going to happen before it happens if it hadn't already happened? you know. So anyway,
Absolutely what I say in Cheating the Ferryman.
right. And so I started all of a sudden breaking up into multiple realities of myself at different ages. So I could walk that same street, but I would be 3 or 4 ages all at the same time, all going whatever direction I wanted to go. And it really got spooky at first, but I'm used to spooky. So um, uh, I could go up in the air, you know, I could look down, I could go to Zelkon, I could go anywhere I wanted, I could go to the past, I could go back to and relive anything I wanted to relive. I could, I created a structure on Zelkon that's all glass, but it can be as small as this room or as big as, I don't know, the state of Michigan. I mean, it can be as big as I want to make it. Okay, it can have trees in it. It can have anything it wants in it. So, because when you're out of body, you don't have any restrictions. There are no impediments to the experience that you want to have, except your own limitation. So I would walk. Remember I told you when I was a kid, I used to walk all day, and my parents didn't even give a shit that I was walking all day, and I'd come home at 5 o'clock and leave at 8, and nobody would even ask me where I went because they didn't really care because they were scared to death of me. So I made that a same walk, and I could hear the same music. I used to sing all the time when I was walking because I must know, I don't know, 500 songs, and I would just sing them, you know, keep myself company. And so I made that same walk at every age, at 8, at 11, at 15. I went on dates with my girlfriends, just like we used to. And I was just like I am sitting here. And they were just like they were. Okay. And there seemed to be no restriction. I remember I used to go to this pool every day in the summer. And the one thing I remembered was jumping into the water and then laying on this structure that was tile that was warm. And I remember the warmth on my body, and I could feel the warmth on my body. And that was 60 years ago. But I felt that warmth. My whole body just warmed up. Now, there was no reason for my body to be warming up, for the simple reason I was sitting in a chair in my study. But I was out of body. I was there. I was back in the past. So, and I could walk around things like any human walks. So all of my criticism of being out of body when I was young, that it was just a hallucination or a game or a mind fuck or whatever you want to call it, completely changed. I know now that there's another dimension to out of body, and that is, got to put this just right. You are constantly existing in every plane possible, every dimension possible. And since you exist on every plane, I mean, even the physicists say that there are maybe 16 to 20 dimensions. Okay, so I am simultaneously existing on almost endless dimensions that have no no time related to them. So I'm not going to die in, I don't know, a few years. You know, I'm 77, so you're 80, 85. This body's gone. And Charon took me to what he called the place of souls. These are souls before birth, some time ago, and they were just rainbow egg-like shapes, but they weren't eggs. They were just rainbows, and there were just like trillions of them, and they just went on just for I don't know how many millions of miles, but there were just but these were all unborn, unincarcerated, conscious creatures that were going to be placed like I was placed. But that one was removed and put back in that group, and then another one was replaced. Well, anyway, since I've given myself over to being out of body, I do it all the time now. So while I'm sitting here talking to you guys, I'm also downstairs meditating. I'm also playing the piano in a piano bar 50 years ago.
You know what I find extraordinary, Myron, is that I think that when you first contacted me, you were very much a vindication of my daemon eidolon dyad and the idea of the daemon being the guide and everything else as well. And what you've just now described is effectively exactly what I'm doing regarding the science of this and the supporting material for exactly the model you are talking about now. My new book, Cheating the Ferryman, will be discussing the science of the idea that we exist in multiple dimensions at the same time, that we exist in a holographic reality that has depth to it, that is reminiscent maybe of the Tesseract sequence in the movie Interstellar, the idea that we are all ourselves for the whole of our lives, that we can flick backwards and forwards within that because it's all information. You know, physical reality is created out of information, as David Bohm would argue, and as people like Vlatko Vedrell are now arguing in terms of the idea of the simulation argument. Now, if this is the case and we're existing in something which is the equivalent of a three-dimensional third-person computer game that has got within it the program of every outcome of every decision you make in your life, you can do exactly what you're doing now. Now, again, in my last book, Opening the Doors, in my last book, The Infinite Universe, I very much argue that this is what is taking place when people have autism, when people experience altered states of consciousness. They just get access to this wider universe, to this much bigger sea of consciousness, you know, that what Buck would call in 1900, you know, the oceanic feeling. And I think it's because as you're getting older, what is happening is, because I argue that the doors of perception are wide open when the child is born, then they slowly get closed more and more until you get to about 8 or 9 years of age. And that's when you can access your mythical friends, the Halliwell beings. Then when you get towards the end of your life, the end of this life, the end of this part of whatever it is we're existing in now, your doors of perception start to open again. And you start to realize that there's much more. And this is what's happening to you now. And I think this is exactly what I witnessed happening to my mother. It's exactly what I've witnessed happening with people that as they get older. So many people, when they get older, tell me this, that suddenly it's like you're becoming a child again. As it says in the Bible, you know, that you need to become a child again to understand. And this is what is happening.
Absolutely. I mean, years ago, I asked Charon, what happens when you die? I mean, Charon's a spirit, right? So she should have the answer. Well, she wouldn't give me the answer. She said, that's not for you to know now. I have the answer now. I didn't have the answer then. This is 30 years ago.
Do you think it's to do with the fact that we have to be of a certain age and a certain level to absolutely understand the grasp, the size and the magnitude of what the metaverse really is? You know, that we can't, as we're young, when we're younger, we can't, we're almost caught in Plato's cave. But as we get older, our knowledge gets more and our level of wisdom gets more, and we're more prepared and ready for it, because you always have to think in abstract terms, don't you, in order to appreciate it. But I'd argue that individuals like yourself, you've always been in the liminal areas. You've always existed in this overlapping place. I mean, this has been the most wonderful interview I think I've ever had, that I've ever done and been involved in, because you are speaking truths here that are so profound and so important. I'm just so honored that Sarah and I have given you the opportunity to really spin out your ideas in such an amazing way. I thank you so much for this interview, and this discussion, because I have learned so much from it. And it's supported so much, as I've always suspected from that first email you sent me. I thought, this is the guy that is going to live and is going to prove my whole hypothesis, because he's living it. You know, and other people turn around to me and they say, oh, come on, Anthony, you know, where's your proof? My proof is Myron Dyal. My proof is Myron Dyal. You are living proof of exactly what I'm trying to say. Now, there'll be people in our group now who are interested in out-of-body experiences, who'll be jumping up and down with absolute fascination about what you're saying. There'll be so many individuals that will be so intrigued by this. And we haven't even touched upon your art and the uncanny nature of that and the visceral nature of that. So what I'm aware now that we're now at 2 hours, nearly 2 hours and a quarter, and I'm aware that we'll probably need to go, because it'd be the limit of what people are interested in. We need to get you back again, and we need to get you back probably sooner rather than later. And I also think I'm very keen to get you back with 1 or 2 other guests that can overlap. It's like a huge Venn diagram. And I keep saying this to my guests, that we need to have some form of online conference. Now, guys, you probably won't be aware of this, but it was supposed to happen this summer, that Myron and I were going to be doing an event in the desert in Southern California called Contact in the Desert. And the plan was that I was going to stand up and I was going to give a talk about cheating the ferryman. Then Myron was going to come up and we were going to have a discussion and everything else. And we were going to join with other people like Victoria Juvoin, who is the lady that runs Contact in the Desert. And I know that Victoria has visited you at your studio recently. And she came back absolutely astounded. She was just astounded. And everybody that I tell about you, they just have this incredible, I've got to meet Myron. I have to meet Myron. And, you know, this is evident from what we've just discussed now. So we're hoping that COVID, if we get through COVID, we'll have the event next year. And if we have it, it's going to be absolutely wonderful. I think it's getting less and less likely that it's going to happen next year, but we have to believe that it will. And it would be great, the more of us that could get together for that event. It would be absolutely fantastic. Sarah, any other final points or questions that have come in? Because I need to probably pull it together soon. But is there any other comments that people have made out there?
Well, let me tell Sarah one thing.
Yep.
I'm not putting down any of the science of the mind. You know, I have an analyst that I go to, but I made it clear to her, I'm not interested in your opinions of my experiences. Yeah. That's not what I'm here about. I'm here about other things. But I'm not putting down science and what science brings to the table. I was listening one night, and I can't remember who it was. It was a physicist, a Nobel Prize winner, and he said, somebody was asking him about finding the final ideas of how the universe was put together and all that sort of stuff. His answer was, we're not smart enough. We're just not smart enough. Maybe a million years from now or 100,000 years from now, we will be. But right now, we're not smart enough.
I totally agree. I think that I was thinking this a couple of days ago, you know, that, and I've mentioned this many times, our science is almost the equivalent of the medieval schoolmen with their epicycles and everything else as
Yeah,
well. We
right.
think we have an explanatory model, but why should we be the fortuitous people that exist in the time within humanity that humanity seems to understand how everything works? I mean, that's complete ridiculous, you know. We're not, we're just at the first. We have a model, but the model is so small. 94% of the universe is missing, you know, with the
Yeah,
things we don't understand and our science can't explain. All we do is we ignore them, like all your experiences. You know,
yeah,
science will just ignore. Your experiences are real, you know, they're real, as everybody who has an extraordinary experience knows that they are, you know. And I think your point there is a powerful one. Science is a structure, but that's all it is. And in a million years' time, they'll look back on this and think, what did those barely evolved monkeys think? You know, they were wrong.
right.
So I was just going to get a point. Is anything else from the you were about to say there?
Yeah.
Just that Aaron asked if there was a new book, and I'm not sure whether he's asking you or I'm sure he's asking both of you if there's plans for new books.
Well, for me, there's the Cheating the Ferryman book, which I've just started researching at the moment, which will be out probably in about 18 months' time. And I'm also under negotiations for a small book series with a USA publisher as well, which I'll be discussing over the next few days with them. But that's my future plans. Myron, have you got anything planned for the future?
My future is every day. Every day I post a painting, just almost every day I post a painting and an explanation of that painting on Facebook. And I don't hold anything back. I used to. I used to hide things that I didn't want people to know. And now I don't. And if you don't like it, fuck you. You know, I mean, I'm sorry about that, but that's the way I feel about it. And I mean, there's a painting on there right now today about when I had a seizure when I used to surf. And I didn't know I had a seizure. I didn't know what that. I thought I just wiped out. And so I'm laying on the beach, and that's the painting. And there's a big explanation of it. So if you want to know about me, just go to Facebook, or you go to my book, which is on my website, and read it because it's all there. You see,
Yeah,
again, Karen came to me. It's really interesting. I really believe that people have unlimited potential because I wasn't a writer. I wasn't an artist. I was just a musician. Not just, but I was a musician. Okay? Karen came to me one day and said, we're going to write a book. And I went, wait. I don't write books. I am not a writer. He said, get a tape recorder and start talking into the tape recorder, have your secretary transcribe it, and let's get going. So a year and a half later, I had a book. And it's been edited a few times, and I sent Tony a copy of it. And it's never been published except for the fact it's on my website. And then when Karen said to me, all right, we're going to start doing this art. I went, wait. You know, I don't do art. You know, I do stick drawings. You know, I mean, I'm a musician. Give me a break here. And I found that, like Georgia O'Keeffe said, an artist's skill will rise to their vision. And my skill has risen to my vision. I'm a sculptor. I draw and I paint. And I've been doing digital paintings now for about 2 years, and I've got 700 of them. And what they are is my whole life history. I mean, everything I've experienced are on those paintings, so that I don't hold anything back, no matter what it is. So I have a record. I have a record of my entire life in these books, and of course the digital ones are inexpensive, and I sell a ton of them because people are fascinated by them, and you know, they're numbered prints, but they're prints. And I'll do one today, for instance. When we're done and I go get bread and some food and stuff, I have one that I want to work on. And I'll do that today, and then I'll write the description of why I'm feeling that energy. It's all about what the energy is trying to get communicated to me, and then to how others take it as their business. But I've noticed that people, they write me and they say, you know, you've changed my life, you've done this, you've done, probably the way Tony gets. He probably gets that all the time. And it's only because I follow my bliss. You know, I mean, Joseph Campbell said, somebody asked him, well, you know, what's the meaning of life? He said, follow your bliss. Well, I have. And it's led me to where I needed to go in that other little film that I was in. That was my last words. So I tell people, you know, if you're, you know, there's an old scripture that I never understood called, many are called, but few are chosen. It's a very strange scripture. And even if you look it up in its original language, not the King James Version, if you look it up in the original language, which I think is Coptic, it's really saying that you have a choice. You can either choose the blue pill or the red pill, to put it in 20th century iconography, and whatever you want to choose, but you've got to do the work. In alchemy, I'm an alchemist. In alchemy, you do the work. You either do the work, and what do alchemists do? They work alone. You know, when you're, you know, and it's hard when you're alone because you don't have people holding you up, and then all of a sudden things like this happen. You know, I meet Tony, and then I met this guy Greg, and anybody that I need comes to me, and I go to them.
Yeah, because you met Clive Barker, didn't you, and did work with him?
Yeah. We did a show together, and called Two Madmen.
Yes.
that was his title. So,
do you know, you and Clive Barker are absolute perfect match. I mean, his movies have the same visceral power, particularly that your sculptures have. You know, immediately when I saw your sculpture, I thought of Clive Barker, you know, and sort of in his Hellraiser series, you know, and you just think, wow, this is fantastic. So if anybody wants to check up on that relationship, you please do as well. I just thought I'd put in on that.
We had a big show together. It was really great, and he was terrific. And but my point was that I don't put down any body that is exploring these things on any level. If it has to be psychiatry and psychology, then that's what it's got to be. If it's got to be medicine and MRIs and PET scans, then it's MRIs and PET scans. If it's got to be shaman to shaman, then it's shaman to shaman. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't intimidate me at all, no matter how you approach it. And how, like for instance, depending on the audience, I might say it a different way. You know, I might say that Charon is an undifferentiated part of myself. I just might say that, just because it makes them feel better. I don't believe that, but that's what I want them to feel better, because they're getting very uncomfortable.
I think it's like a question of multiple realities. Like, these things exist on all level of reality. And as a, you know, if someone was a neuroscientist, they would look at it according to a scan of the brain, but that's so reductionist and goes nowhere near the full measure of the reality of the experience for anybody. But it's a bit like, you know, it's a bit like the sort of wave particle aspect of, if you observe something, it changes. And I think if you choose to observe something in a certain way, then it changes the nature of it, and you start to see it in that dimension of reality. I mean, I think these things can all happen simultaneously. I do think the looking at things medically or psychologically, you're only seeing one side of a story, and it's very hard to see those things simultaneously.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was with in the Epilepsy Foundation, I was with at least 100 neurologists, and some of the best neurologists in the world, especially in the national organization, which meets in Washington once a year. In fact, we have some of the greatest speakers in the world there. And the weird thing about it is they're so stuck in the details of their research and what they have decided is really working, what's happening. Unless it's Oliver Sacks. I mean, I had a 3-hour conversation with Oliver Sacks, signed my book, and oh yeah, on hallucinations, that one, I talked to him for 3 hours, and if he hadn't passed away, we were going to have a long conversation about it.
That would have been unbelievable. That would have been
yeah,
absolutely unbelievable. I'd love to have met him. I love his work.
He described to me things that exactly paralleled my stuff, except that he was using drugs to get to those places when he was an undergrad at medical school at UCLA. And so I don't care how what you need to put think about my poor daughter. You know, she has to put all this together, and you know, she's not like me. Okay.
But you also do come across as incredibly grounded, and I think for a lot of people, those experiences could have made it very hard for them to have a sense of grounding. Does meditation help you with that?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I mean, meditation is a way to leave the body. That's one thing, because the body is not really part of it. And I think that if you can concentrate in meditation, you know, and let the world go. My trick when I started meditation was that, as far as I was concerned, it was 1,000,000 years in the future. So there was no past. Everybody I ever knew was dead. All the people I was working with were gone. And there was just me and the universe and Karen, and that's it. And that was my way into complete, elimination of focusing on, oh, I've got to pay my bills, and my wife's giving me all kinds of trouble, and I got trouble at the work, and trying to get that. All that was gone. I immediately decided it was 1,000,000 years in the future, and all that was gone. So all I had left was what I was involved in. So yeah, I think meditation's a good start. But you have to be open. You have to be available. I ask people, are you available? They ask me all the time, how do you ever get to this stuff? I said, do you want to do the work? Americans are lazy. I mean, some of these people meditate for 40 years before they get to where they are, where they want to get to.
Do you think that reset that you had when you came into the body, I mean, that must have been a big shock to be in a 4-year-old's body, having not had that previous experience? Do you think that you were, because your soul was maybe at a younger state, that you were able to have that flexibility with reality and see things unusually at that point?
I think that when I came into the new soul, it was an old soul, because I was interested in things that were very mature. I mean, listening to jazz and listening to classical music, I mean, it's not something a 4-year-old, my parents didn't listen to music.
Yeah.
So, but I would listen to very complex music. And I was reading mystical books from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, and never mind the Bible, which I was reading as well. But I think that so back to when people say to me, so what do I have to do it? And
Yeah.
how do you do it? How do you do all these paintings and work 60 hours a week? I said, because when you're out playing golf, I'm working on my art. When you go on vacation, I'm working on my art. Okay, I mean, everybody has to pick what it is that they want to go do. And I haven't got any objection to a person living a perfectly normal life. And I have a lot of friends who have a lot of money. They travel. Fine. They're not called to be what I am.
That's exactly
And it's not my business to judge them.
Yeah. It's divine inspiration. And I bet you're very popular with outsider art collectors. And I love a lot of outsider art.
Yeah.
And
When I started selling, I sold a lot of stuff, but a lot of it wasn't for sale for many, many years.
Well, I went to the Art Brut Museum in Lausanne, which is one of the best collections of outsider art. And it made me cry for 3 days afterwards, because you can feel, I think art really speaks to me when you could tell it's had that divine inspiration. And a lot of the people that are in that collection, that art is so divinely inspired, it transmits into your body. Like, I like people like Paul Lafferly. Do you know Paul Lafferly? It's like, does these incredible paintings, and you can feel the sort of direct communication from source through that art into you, because they're so divinely inspired to create it. And like you say, it's following your bliss and going with that flow of source that can't help but transmit to the audience.
Yeah, well, we went to my wife and I. We went to a museum in Vancouver, at the University of Vancouver, of Indian totems and all that stuff that they had a collection of. And I was so blown away by what I saw that I told her, I said, you're going to just have to go away for a while. I've got to internalize what I'm looking at. And I can't do it. I just can't do it in 10 minutes. It's going to take me hours to get through just half a dozen of these wonderful sculptures. I mean, the power of the energy of those animals and the anthropomorphic part of it was just so strong.
Yeah.
God damn it. It was so powerful.
I get that with the ancient Egyptian stuff when I go to the museum.
Absolutely. In fact, I had a friend that I grew up with who moved to San Jose, and there's a museum, a Rosicrucian museum in
Oh my
San
God,
Jose.
that's a dream museum to go to. I've seen loads of photographs of that. It looks so.
They have mummies. They have all kind of the Egyptian stuff.
Got an amazing collection.
I was there when I was like 10, and I was blown away by it. I mean, again, they wanted to leave, and I said, I can't go. I can't leave this. I have got to communicate with this stuff. And they were saying, what's he communicate? I mean, I was 10 years old. And I spent all day there. I just said, just leave and come back and pick me up later. I mean, it was so strong. I mean,
yeah, you get the sense with
once I'm in their world, their psychic world, I sometimes can't get out. I have to work my way back out of it. It's their truth manifested their way. Interestingly enough, so what are the pyramids? They're a representation of Orion. That's what they are. They're lined up and they're Orion. So is there a connection between me and, because Zelkon is in Orion's belt. So when I found that Osiris was Orion, I just went, whoa, wait a minute. That was 5,000, 6,000 years ago that they put that Orion on the ground. The whole thing is on the ground. I mean, they have it. I mean, the measurement is fantastic. And they put the whole Orion on the ground because that's Osiris. And and Icarus and all the rest of them. I mean, all those images were so strong, you know, that I just felt like I was home again. You know, we could go on for days. I mean, we're never going to get this done. So we'll have to talk again because I know you guys have got time and.
Yeah, it's getting dark now.
Yeah, but it's been absolutely awesome is the word I can use here. I mean, it's been thoroughly enjoyable. It has been fascinating. It's been inspiring. There's a million and one things that this thing is what it's been like, you know, so it's been so good. So what I'd like to say is finally, Myron, can you let the guys know where your website is and anything else they can find? And one thing I will stress, if you're fascinated by Myron's work, do read his book, The Boy That Nobody Wanted. It is moving, it is beautifully written, and it gives you such an insight into Myron. But also check out his award-winning documentaries as well. They're well worth watching. And check out his art. Although the things he's got behind him are fascinating, I still think it's the stuff in the basement that you want to see. It's the stuff in the basement that's just unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
If you if you just Google my name, Myron Dyal, the website comes up, you know, and a million other things come up. You can go to videos, and then there's all kinds of videos that I've done where I just talk online. I made a confession of my life. Caron said, "You've got to let all this out." So I made the confession about my alcoholism and drug addiction and all the rest of it. So it's all right there. So nobody can accuse me of not telling the truth because I put it out there. It's all on YouTube. But my website's really just myrondyal.com. But if you just go to Google and Google my name, everything comes up. Even the new film that we've won 5 film festivals so far. In fact, the St. Louis one probably will go to the Oscars.
Wow.
It's going to be submitted.
Wow. Well, I'll put a link up there as well for you. And Sarah, can you just tell the guys a little bit about your website and everything as well, so they know where to find your work?
I'm on themysteries.org, and so that's where you can find links to all of my Explorers Club talks. The next one I've got is this Saturday, actually, which I'm talking about dream incubation in ancient Greece. And then following that, Professor Aidan Dodson, who's an Egyptologist based at the University of Bristol, is talking about rediscovering the early dynastic period in Egypt. So it's mostly Egyptologically orientated these days.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the next time this will be going out live will be next Monday at the same time, the 30th, where we've got Professor Richard Grosinger, who is anthropologist, writer, all-round polymath. So that's going to be a really interesting one as well, following on. So we're building up quite a steam here, a back steam of power and powerful interviews. So let's join in, let your friends know and everything else as well. This will be placed up on YouTube in the next day or so. It also will remain up on Facebook as well, and I'll put all the links up there. Right, Myron, thank you very much for a wonderful discussion. We will have you back on again soon, and let's just hope that we get that thing together next year in California as well.
Lovely to meet you, Myron. See ya.
See ya. Bye, folks.
Yeah. Nice meeting you, Sarah. I'll look your stuff up, and because I love Egyptology. So.
Oh, cool. You'll like some of this stuff then.
Oh yeah. I mean, they were an amazing people. Just an amazing people. You know. And anyway.
Wonderful. Bye. Okay, guys. All the best. Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Right. Have I lost you all?